during the Vietnam conflict. He was in Vietnam taking pictures of little children being boiled alive by whatever we were bombing them with and stuff like that.
And you are right.
I'm right that his name's Earl?
Yeah. It says, Dexter King says no. Okay, question. There are many people out there who feel that as long as these conspirators remain nameless and faceless, there is no true closure and no justice. Dexter King, one of Martin Luther King's
His oldest
sons.
son.
No, he named the shooter. The shooter was the Memphis Police Department officer, Lieutenant Earl Clark, who he named as the killer. Once again, beyond that, you had credible witnesses that named members of a special forces team who didn't have to act because the contract killer succeeded with plausible denial. A mafia-contracted killer.
Okay, so he did have the word Earl. I forgot the name you just read. Earl what?
Earl Clark.
Earl Clark. I think I was remembering that earlier, and then I was like, wait a second, my brainwashing took over.
So
but
at
it's
least you
weird
had
that the real
yeah.
killer, his name's Earl, and then the
James Earl Ray.
the guy that was set up had the word Earl.
Tennessee, everybody's Earl.
Yeah, there must have been a lot of Earls born that year that they were both born, which I just made up. I don't know. But okay, so back to Dr. Pepper's story. He got to meet Dr. Martin Luther King, and whenever he met with him, he showed him these pictures from the Vietnam War. And Dr. King developed instantly a conscience about not having spoken out against war, being a pacifist. He started developing a larger consciousness, an international one, where he's not just concerned with, the civil rights movement.
Right.
He's moving on. So anyway,
to something that actually threatened.
Who's William Pepper?
William Pepper is the King family lawyer in this case. So his story is he showed Martin Luther King these pictures. Martin Luther King threw his chicken lunch on the ground, just took his hand and he said he could never eat again until he started, coming out against the war in Vietnam. He was going to do away with that war. So anyway,
which I think implies a lot too for that to be the turning point.
He started, well, this is why he felt responsible for him getting killed, because then Dr. King comes out against the Vietnam War and says a lot of eloquent, damaging things about, he describes soldiers as deranged, during the speech and stuff, coming back from home deranged. And
he backs it up with biblical principles.
Yeah, the Dr. King's Riverside speech, he gave this 1 year. I think it's his most brilliant speech. Anti-war speech, pacifist, totally righteous. He gave it 1 year to the day before he was killed, and if that's not a message, neither is him getting shot in the mouth, being a great orator or whatever that word is. Right?
Orator, yeah.
Yeah, orator. He's good with his mouth. Anyway, so Martin Luther King, he came out. Anyway, he was obviously killed. The morning he did that Riverside speech, he started getting tracked by military intelligence. He'd already been hounded by the FBI for decades, right?
Right.
And the military started tracking him.
Right.
And then they started training people to kill him.
But the military soldiers would never do something like that, right? Only
they hadn't
police and other people.
They hadn't been hardened by assassinating 100,000 people in Vietnam under the Phoenix program, right? That's the same program that Mel Gibson worked for in Lethal Weapon before he became a cop. Riggs, that's the reason he's crazy. He used to assassinate people or whatever. But that was a real thing, the Phoenix program.
Right.
And
So Martin Luther King, obviously a controversial figure to white people at the time. A lot of,
Black people too.
Well, yeah, everyone in general, but as far as threats against him, surveillance against him, that wasn't anything new. But there was no decision, let's eliminate this man from the planet Earth until they spoke out. He spoke out because of his influence. I'm sure, lots of people spoke out against the war, and a lot of other people died doing that too, though. But, he had influence, and that was the turning point, he's going to now actually have a big, big say in our, not only what the military does, but our empire building is the way I see it. It was like a big threat beyond just civil rights. It really hit them where they actually cared, which was their money and their and their expansion of power is the way I see it.
And if you want to know the name of everybody who killed Martin Luther King, General Yarborough, his name is, in the movie JFK, they call him General Y. You know, there's a Mr. X who works in the government or whatever, and then there's a General Y. That's for Yarborough. So he's accused from an Oliver Stone's movie of organizing the death of JFK, but we know that he organized the death of MLK through a what were these groups called that organized the CIA and the military together back then?
The OSS, is that what you're talking
about? During Vietnam, I think they were called some special operations groups.
Oh,
yeah, the CIA was basically working with other intelligence agencies and the military. They were basically like little conspiracies that ran by the CIA to kill people. He put that together, the special operations group that trained to kill Martin Luther King.
Like give him a broader
and this is the time frame where that's what I was reading earlier. Like the OSS was actually the CIA at the time, right?
In World War II, I think. Before they became the CIA.
I'm getting the conspiracy part of this trial transcript, which is its own.
Yeah, topic. We got to talk about that too. So the reason this trial came to be, Dr. Pepper, decades later, became a lawyer. Became James Earl Ray's lawyer at some point, and he believed him. He introduced James Earl Ray, the accused assassin, to the King family, who met with him directly. Asked him, "Did you kill my daddy?" Dexter King asked him. He said no. Dexter King believed him based on talking to him in a story about being manipulated by the CIA through this Raul character that you mentioned, and so who was a gun runner. But anyway.
Well, he never confessed. James Earl Ray never confessed.
Right.
To committing the crime. He did a plea.
Well, he got... Okay, what Dr. Pepper did get James Earl Ray, he never got a new trial. He did get a trial that was a mock trial shown on HBO, in which they had a real judge. It didn't have any real bearing on in reality. It was an entertainment thing, but it was a real judge that was presiding over it. You know, they had real people that were supposed to be the jury or whatever, and the result of the HBO trial, which I would love to watch, that would be cool, was that James Earl Ray was innocent, you know, not guilty is what they found him or whatever. And a part of that was this Lloyd Jowers guy. Lloyd Jowers had been on TV, in little TV documentaries on CNN and stuff, talking about his role in killing Martin Luther King, so... it all came together. They then after this they, got a real trial.
Right. There's something here it's kind of a reiteration, but I keep seeing stuff that I think is interesting. This is from the King family statement. It said, after hearing and reviewing the extensive testimony and evidence, which had never before been tested under oath in a court of law, it took the Memphis jury only an hour and a half of deliberation to find that a conspiracy to kill Dr. King did exist. Most significantly, this conspiracy involved agents of the governments of the city of Memphis, the state of Tennessee, and the United States of America. The overwhelming weight of the evidence also indicated that James Earl Ray was not the trigger man and, in fact, was an unknown patsy. We stand by that verdict and have no doubt that the truth about this terrible event has finally been revealed. It says, we urge all interested Americans to read the transcript of the trial on the King Center website and consider the evidence so they can form their own unbiased conclusion.
What you want to do, you go and read what Kaylin's talking about, the press conference with the King family.
Right.
And then they give you little clues on what, whose testimony you really need to look up, this guy Shapp or whatever. And they talk about, but basically you read the closing arguments if you want an overview of exactly how the plot went down and what was revealed during the court case and which witnesses talked about. There was a duffel bag found in front of a toy shop around the time of the killing, and it had like beer cans with James Earl Ray's prints on them and the rifle that they said it was used to shoot Martin Luther King, right? Which has never been tested, right? Like it never was. He made some plea or whatever. But the duffel bag was dropped like half an hour before the shooting, according to the people who found it. The toy store owner.
Right.
Or whatever. So this shit just, I mean, it's staged, right? They're dropping
Right.
props and all kinds of stuff like that. The sniper's nest, the bushes that they say the real assassin killed Martin Luther King from were cut down the next day, right? Destroyed the crime scene.
Right.
You know, they got rid of all the footprints. They could be tracked right back to that cop.
Yeah,
Clark.
and there's a lot of witnesses, people who were never questioned. There was really basically no investigation.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so during this, in the trial transcripts, you'll also find testimony from people who were on the kill team, right?
Right. Well, the guy that saw, who was it that, well, there's people who just end up dead. There's the, there's so much
witnesses?
to it. Yeah, witnesses, there's so much to it.
Man, you want to read Dr. Pepper's book, too, because he's got a lot of insights that maybe didn't necessarily make it in the court, but based on hunches and logic of what he had learned, facts he had learned about this case, right?
Right.
For instance, that Andrew Jackson helped to kill Martin Luther King. This sort of...
Jesse.
Who did I say?
Andrew.
True. Andrew Jackson.
He's standing right there like...
Man. Aaron, will you tag in? Talk for me. I gotta go pee.
Well, there's another thing here that I was talking about as far as a cover-up. A taxi driver at the Motel Lorraine, at the time of the shooting, witnessed a man come down out of the bushes that we talked about just a minute ago, run up the street, get into a waiting Memphis Police Department traffic car, which sped away. He reported this to the dispatcher and was questioned by the police a few times that week. But he never gave a statement because he was thrown out of a speeding car off the Arkansas-Memphis Bridge.
Good God.
There's no death record for this man, but they found his phone number listed with his wife in 1966 and 67. In 68, his wife, Betty, said he was killed for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So... what we were talking about earlier was the idea of the conspiracy behind it, or above that and beyond that, goes past the point of the assassination and into the media manipulation and cover up after the fact.
And MLK kind of calling out what was going to happen to begin with.
Well, yeah, like we listened to, that speech itself was very ominous and prophetic,
But
in that
provocative too. I mean,
Right.
If you think about it, and him kind of calling the government's bluff, and then they go and prove him right. You know,
right.
Kind of paints a dirty picture.
You can
Right.
sit there. I just was gonna
Go ahead.
So, right, I mean, he knew it was coming, unfortunately. I think that was the point, like you're saying, in that speech, is he was... The
speech you played right before this was his final speech, the final moment of his final speech.
Right.
Like the last minute and a half, which, by the way, I know we talked about this before, that's a real unit of measurement. A moment, it's 90 seconds long.
Right.
90 seconds?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard that. I think, did we
It's
talk
in the back
about
of the
that?
dictionary. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that speech is great. Yeah, he's just talking about dying the whole time, right?
Right.
And then turns around and collapses into the arms of like Jesse Jackson and his crew.
Yeah, Judas himself.
Yeah, and then the next day he actually literally did collapse into his arms. Jesse Jackson knocked on his door, got him to come outside. Jesse Jackson wasn't wearing a tie.
Yeah.
According to Jesse Jackson's own testimonies and stuff about the day, they even had dialogue about that. Martin King said, "Why aren't you wearing a tie? We're going to this preacher's house." He said, "There's no requisite to eat dinner that means wearing a tie or whatever." But what that meant for the kill team was that King's people who weren't wearing ties that day were
Like
friendlies. They weren't to be shot.
That's right.
There were
Right.
people that were allowed to be shot with Dr. King. You know, there was more than one target.
Right.
But anyway.
Well, I mean, there's so much to it. I think that the next part of this that we might want to get into is kind of, like I said, the media cover up, the perpetuation of the conspiracy through the media to never even. I mean, how can we not, as a mass, a population, not know this
The
information?
media didn't cover
right?
this trial. It
Right.
was
So-
blacked out.
Exactly. So we're going to take a little break, and that's what we're going to get into next for just at least a little bit. And there's so much, like I said, there's so much to this. It's ridiculous. So